the mission you were never told. Perhaps awakening was never the destination. Perhaps awakening was only the beginning. Throughout history, every awakened being returned to the world, not to escape it, but to love it, not to change other people, but to become a living reminder of what humanity has forgotten. Some traditions call them bodhisattvas. Some call them saints. Some call them children of God. Today, many people call them starseeds, not because they came from another planet, but because their consciousness carries the frequency of wisdom and unconditional love. Their mission is surprisingly simple: not to save the world, not to convince the world, not to build another religion. Their mission is to restore the original code of human consciousness, not through belief, but through presence. They heal without trying to heal. They teach without trying to teach. Sometimes they say very little because their greatest language is not words. It is the silent field they carry wherever they go. Around them, people begin to slow down, to breathe, to remember, not because someone gave them an answer, but because their own awareness begins to awaken. Perhaps this is what real healing has always been: not changing who we are, but remembering who we have always been. And perhaps that is why you never needed to travel to the stars, because the moment the ego becomes transparent, the light you are searching for begins to shine through you, not somewhere far away, but here, on this earth, in this breath, in this moment. So what does it actually mean to be fully present with reality as it is? Let's explore that together.
The greatest misunderstanding. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding in human history has never been about God, nor about the Buddha, nor about the universe. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding is about ourselves. We spend our entire lives trying to change our emotions, repair our thoughts, control our destiny, and become a better version of the person we believe ourselves to be. Yet almost no one ever asks the most important question: who is the one trying to change? The map of consciousness. David Hawkins proposed what he called the map of consciousness, not as a measure of human worth, but as a symbolic way of describing different states of consciousness: fear, shame, guilt, anger, pride, courage, acceptance, love, peace, enlightenment. Each state represents a different way through which consciousness experiences reality. At lower states, awareness feels contracted, separated, isolated, threatened. Life becomes a struggle between me and everything else. At higher states, that separation begins to dissolve. Love no longer feels like an emotion. It becomes the natural fragrance of being itself. But perhaps there is something even more important than moving upward through these states. The real question most people ask: how do I become more peaceful? How do I raise my vibration? How do I heal? But the awakened ones asked a completely different question: who is experiencing all these states? You are not the voice inside your mind. The greatest illusion is believing that you are the voice inside your head. The endless thinking, the judging, the comparing, the remembering, the worrying, the planning. But if you can hear that voice, who is listening? If you can observe your thoughts, you cannot be your thoughts. The voice changes every second. Sometimes joyful, sometimes fearful, sometimes angry, sometimes silent. Yet something has never changed. The silent awareness that notices every single thought. It was present before your first memory. It remained through every experience. And it is here now, reading these very words. You are not the voice. You are the awareness that has always been listening. That is why every awakened tradition points toward the same discovery. Not another belief, not another philosophy, but a direct recognition. You are not the content of consciousness. You are consciousness itself, the observer. Once this is seen, everything begins to change. Not because life changes, but because the one who experiences life is finally recognized. Thoughts become objects. Emotions become objects. Sensations become objects. Even the ego becomes an object appearing inside awareness, and awareness itself remains untouched, still, silent, present. This is what the Buddha called knowing. This is what Jesus pointed toward when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you." Perhaps they were never speaking about two different truths. Perhaps they were pointing toward the very same awareness. Awareness appears at the moment of contact. If awareness is the silent observer, then where does suffering begin? The Buddha answered this question with extraordinary precision. Every experience begins when one of the 6 sense doors comes into contact with the world. The eyes meet form. The ears meet sound. The nose meets scent. The tongue meets taste. The body meets sensation. The mind meets thought. This simple contact is neither good nor bad. It is simply life unfolding. But almost instantly, something else appears. Feeling, pleasure, discomfort, neutrality. And if awareness is absent, the ancient movement begins. Grasping, rejecting, becoming. The entire machinery of suffering starts to move before we even notice it. This is why mindfulness is not merely a practice. It is the sacred space where freedom first becomes possible. Between contact and reaction, there is a silent opening. A single moment where consciousness can remember itself. When that moment is seen, karma is no longer unconscious. Choice becomes possible, not because reality changes, but because the observer is finally awake.
The birth of karma. Once contact is clearly seen, another profound discovery appears. Karma does not begin with action. It begins long before action. A single thought, a single intention, a single unconscious reaction. This is where the entire future is quietly being created. Most people believe their suffering comes from the outside world, from difficult people, from painful circumstances, from bad luck. But the Buddha pointed somewhere else. Between contact and action, the mind makes a choice, usually without knowing it. When pleasure appears, the mind reaches. When discomfort appears, the mind resists. When neutrality appears, the mind searches for stimulation. Craving, aversion, ignorance. These 3 movements have silently shaped human history. Yet none of them are inevitable, because there is one power greater than habit: awareness. The moment awareness clearly recognizes what is happening, habit loses its unconscious authority. The reaction pauses. The old pattern weakens. Something entirely new becomes possible. This is why the Buddha never taught blind obedience. He taught clear seeing, because only what is clearly seen can truly be transformed. When pleasure appears, the mind reaches. When discomfort appears, the mind resists. When neutrality appears, the mind begins searching for something more. Craving, aversion, ignorance. These 3 ancient movements have quietly shaped every civilization, every conflict, every personal story. But the Buddha discovered something extraordinary. Between what happens and how we respond, there is a hidden space. A space so subtle that most people live their entire lives without ever noticing it. The Buddha called it mindfulness. Not concentration, not suppression, not control, but a clear, careful, living awareness that watches without immediately reacting. This is why the Buddha praised carefulness above almost every other virtue. Because careful awareness is the first interruption in the chain of dependent origination. Contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, suffering. The chain appears inevitable until awareness enters the moment. The instant awareness fully sees a feeling arising, craving loses its automatic power. The old pattern hesitates. Habit no longer rules. Freedom quietly enters the system. This is the true transformation of karma, not changing the past, but ending the unconscious future before it is created. For the first time, life is no longer driven by conditioning. It begins to move through wisdom, not because the world has changed, but because the one who sees has awakened. Healing begins when resistance ends. For thousands of years, humanity has searched for ways to heal the body. Medicines, techniques, therapies, rituals, and many of them have brought great benefit. But perhaps the deepest healing does not begin with the body. Perhaps it begins the moment the mind stops fighting what already is. The body has extraordinary intelligence. Every wound knows how to close. Every bone knows how to rebuild. Every cell knows how to renew itself. Long before we understood biology, life already knew how to heal. So why does suffering remain? Because the body is often trying to heal, while the mind keeps reopening the wound. One memory. Again. One fear. Again. One resentment. Again. The event ended years ago. Yet the nervous system still behaves as though it is happening right now. Not because the past still exists, but because the mind keeps recreating it. Awareness does not erase the past. Awareness simply ends our unconscious participation in recreating it. And when resistance ends, the body no longer wastes its energy fighting imaginary dangers. Breathing becomes deeper. The heart becomes softer. The muscles begin to release. The immune system works without interruption. This is not a miracle. It is simply what the body has always wanted to do. Healing is not something we manufacture. Healing is what naturally happens when conflict comes to an end. Perhaps God never needed to repair the human body. Perhaps He only waits for the mind to become still enough to allow life to do what it has always known. The observer and reality. Modern physics offers a fascinating image. Not a proof, not a doctrine. Simply a metaphor. In the quantum world, observation plays a remarkable role in how certain phenomena are described. Whether we fully understand its meaning or not, it invites a profound question. What happens when awareness enters experience? Imagine walking through life completely asleep. Every word becomes personal. Every criticism becomes an attack. Every disappointment becomes another wound. Now imagine the same moment, seen with complete awareness. The event is still there. The words are still spoken. The feeling still arises. But something fundamental has changed. You are no longer inside the experience. You are aware of the experience. That single shift changes everything. Awareness does not erase what is happening. It changes our relationship to what is happening. And sometimes, that is the only miracle life has ever needed. Perhaps reality has never asked us to control it. Perhaps it has only asked us to witness it completely. Because the deepest freedom is not found in changing every circumstance. It is found in discovering the one that no circumstance has ever been able to change. Why seeing is the highest action. People often believe that transformation requires effort, more discipline, more control, more techniques, more spiritual practices. But perhaps true transformation begins before any action. It begins the moment we truly see. When anger appears, most people immediately react. Some express it. Others suppress it. Both remain inside the same prison. Awareness chooses a different way. It simply sees. Without judgment. Without resistance. Without becoming the anger itself. The moment anger is completely seen, something extraordinary happens. The one who was identified with anger disappears. Only awareness remains. And what remains cannot suffer in the same way. Seeing is therefore not passive. It is the deepest action possible. Because clear seeing changes the very structure of consciousness, not by force, but by truth. Darkness never leaves because we fight it. Darkness disappears the instant light appears. In exactly the same way, ignorance does not end through struggle. It ends through seeing. Perhaps this is why the Buddha never promised salvation through belief. He pointed again and again toward direct knowing, because reality does not need to be changed. It only needs to be seen. The energy was never the problem. Perhaps we have misunderstood energy itself. We spend our lives trying to eliminate fear, anger, sadness, desire, as though they were enemies. But energy is never the enemy. Energy is simply movement. Fear is energy. Love is energy. Anger is energy. Peace is energy. What transforms one into another is not force. It is awareness. Imagine sunlight passing through a prism. The light itself has never changed. Only the way it is expressed. Human consciousness is no different. When awareness is forgotten, the same life force appears as fear. When awareness returns, that very same force becomes clarity, compassion, wisdom. Nothing new is added. Nothing old is destroyed. Only illusion falls away. Perhaps God has never been sending us more energy. Perhaps God has always been inviting us to remember what the energy truly is. The Tathagata pointed to the same mystery. Nothing needs to be created. Nothing needs to become perfect. Reality is already complete. Only ignorance covers it. Like clouds covering the sun, the clouds do not diminish the light. They only hide it. And the moment they pass, we realize the sun never disappeared. Maybe awakening is exactly like that. We do not become something greater. We simply stop mistaking ourselves for the clouds. When awareness becomes completely present, something extraordinary happens. The energy itself does not disappear. Only its form begins to change. Fear becomes understanding. Anger becomes clarity. Grief becomes compassion. Desire becomes creative life. Nothing is rejected. Nothing is suppressed. Nothing is forced to become something else. Because awareness does not fight experience. It illuminates it. And whatever is fully illuminated naturally transforms. This is why the Buddha never taught the destruction of the mind. He taught understanding. This is why Jesus never asked people to hate themselves. He invited them to awaken to the kingdom already within. Perhaps God does not transform energy by changing what we feel. Perhaps God transforms energy by awakening the one who is aware of what is being felt. The emotion is not the problem. The thought is not the problem. The body is not the problem. The only suffering comes when awareness forgets itself and believes it has become the emotion, the thought, the body, the story. But the moment awareness remembers, everything returns to its natural order. Not because the world has become peaceful, but because the war inside has finally ended. The end of separation. Perhaps this is what every great spiritual tradition has been trying to reveal. Not a new religion, not another belief, but the end of separation. The ego survives by division. Me and you. Success and failure. Gain and loss. Life and death. Every label creates another boundary. Every boundary creates another fear. But awareness creates none. Awareness does not divide. It simply sees. Like the sky receiving every cloud, awareness welcomes every experience without becoming any of them. This is why true compassion does not need to be manufactured. The moment the illusion of separation begins to dissolve, love appears by itself. Not because we have learned how to love, but because there is no longer anyone left to defend. Perhaps this is the deepest meaning of enlightenment. Not becoming someone extraordinary, but finally remembering that we were never separate from life itself. The river never fought to reach the ocean. It only stopped resisting its own nature. And perhaps the journey home has always been exactly the same. Beyond changing ourselves, perhaps this is where the greatest paradox appears. For centuries, humanity has believed that spiritual growth means becoming someone better. A better person, a purer person, a holier person, a more enlightened person. Yet every attempt to become someone else quietly assumes one thing, that who you are right now is incomplete. The ego loves this idea because it survives through endless improvement. There is always another level, another achievement, another awakening, another identity to acquire. But awareness seeks none of these. Awareness does not become. Awareness simply is. The sky never struggles to become more spacious. The ocean never practices becoming more wet. The sun never trains to become more radiant. Their nature is already complete. Perhaps our deepest nature is no different. What if nothing essential is missing? What if everything we seek is hidden, not behind another experience, but behind the ending of our constant search? Then the journey changes completely. No longer a climb toward perfection, but a return to simplicity. No longer collecting more knowledge, but releasing everything that obscures clear seeing. Perhaps awakening is not the creation of a new self. It is the quiet recognition that the self we have been trying to improve was never our deepest identity at all. The silence that was always here. There is something strangely beautiful about silence. Not the silence that exists when there is no sound, but the silence that remains even while the world continues to speak. The mind may still produce thoughts. The body may still feel pain. Life may still rise and fall. Yet beneath every movement, something has never moved. A quiet presence, not created through meditation, not earned through discipline, not given by any teacher. It has always been here. Like the screen behind every image, like the space holding every star, like the ocean beneath every wave. We spend years trying to calm the waves, yet the ocean has never been disturbed. Perhaps peace is not something we achieve. Perhaps peace is what remains when we stop mistaking ourselves for the waves. The search comes to an end not because every question has been answered, but because the one asking the questions has finally come home. Nothing has ever been separate. Look closely, and something astonishing begins to reveal itself. The tree does not breathe by itself. The ocean does not exist by itself. Even your next breath is not yours alone. The air has traveled through forests, mountains, birds, animals, and countless human lives before arriving here. Everything is participating in everything else. Nothing exists alone. The Buddha called this dependent origination. Nothing arises by itself. Nothing remains by itself. Nothing disappears by itself. Every moment is woven from infinite relationships. Perhaps this is why love is not merely a moral teaching. It is the most accurate description of reality, because when separation is carefully examined, it cannot be found. There are bodies. There are thoughts. There are names. There are stories. But beneath all of them, there is one life appearing as many. One light shining through countless windows. One ocean playing as countless waves. Perhaps this is why forgiveness becomes possible. Not because someone was right or wrong, but because the illusion of absolute separation begins to dissolve. And when that illusion falls away, compassion does not need to be practiced. It simply flows, like water finding its own level, like sunlight touching every leaf, without choosing one over another. Perhaps this has always been the secret hidden in plain sight. Not that we must learn to become one, but that we have never been anything else. No one needs to be saved. Perhaps this is the hardest truth to accept. Our entire lives we have believed that we are someone searching for salvation. One day, when we become good enough, wise enough, pure enough, enlightened enough, then we will finally arrive. But look more carefully. Who is walking? Who is searching? Who is trying to become? The ego always lives in tomorrow. It whispers, just a little more. Try a little harder. Achieve one more thing. Become someone greater. But awareness does not live in tomorrow. Awareness knows only this moment, here, now. If this moment is seen completely, what else needs to arrive? If this reality is fully embraced, who is still lacking? Perhaps liberation is not reaching another destination. Perhaps it begins the moment we stop running away from where we already are, like someone wandering across the world searching for home, only to awaken and discover they had never left it. Perhaps this is what every awakened being has always been pointing toward. No one needs to be saved. Only a dream is waiting to awaken. And perhaps that awakening has never been the birth of someone new. It is simply the end of forgetting who has been here all along. The seeker was never the destination. The journey was never about becoming. It was always about remembering. And what is remembered cannot be lost ever again. The end of the search. And perhaps this is why every true master appears so ordinary. They no longer carry the burden of becoming. They no longer wake up asking, how can I complete myself? Because what needed to be completed was never their true nature. The river does not wonder whether it deserves the ocean. The flower does not compare itself to another flower. The stars do not compete to shine. Only the human mind imagines that existence must be earned. Yet existence has already said yes to you. Before your first thought. Before your first success. Before your first mistake. Life never asked you to prove that you belong. It only asked you to be present enough to notice that you have always belonged. Perhaps this is why gratitude appears so naturally when awakening begins. Not gratitude because life has finally become easy, but gratitude because we discover that life has been carrying us even while we believed we were carrying ourselves. Every breath was given. Every heartbeat was given. Every sunrise arrived without asking anything in return. Perhaps grace was never something that descended from heaven. Perhaps grace has always been the quiet fact that reality has never stopped embracing us, even when we forgot to embrace ourselves. And maybe this is why the awakened stop searching. Not because they have found everything, but because they have discovered that the one they were searching for has been looking through their own eyes from the very beginning. The illusion of time. Perhaps there is one final illusion that quietly sustains every other illusion. Time. Not the movement of planets. Not the rhythm of sunrise and sunset. But psychological time. The endless feeling that fulfillment exists somewhere other than here. The ego cannot survive without tomorrow. It whispers, One day, I will finally be enough. One day, I will find peace. One day, I will awaken. But awareness has never lived in one day. Awareness has never left this moment. The future exists only as thought. The past exists only as memory. Yet the one who knows both memory and imagination is present before either appears. This is why every awakened tradition returns to the same invitation. Be here. Not because the present moment is morally superior, but because it is the only place where reality has ever existed. The mind travels through centuries. Awareness never takes a single step. It simply shines, like the sun that does not chase the morning. Morning arrives because the earth turns toward the light. Perhaps awakening is not our journey toward truth. Perhaps it is simply the moment we stop turning away from what has always been here. The eternal present, perhaps there has never been another moment than this one. Every memory appears now. Every imagination appears now. Every dream appears now. Even the idea of later exists only now. The mind stretches this moment into a story called time. Awareness simply illuminates what is here, nothing more, nothing less. This is why peace cannot be postponed. Truth cannot be postponed. Love cannot be postponed. Because reality has never postponed itself. It has only waited patiently for us to stop leaving the place where it has always been. Perhaps every spiritual path has only one purpose. Not to give us a new destination, but to dissolve the illusion that we were ever separate from the one who has been living this life all along. When that illusion falls away, nothing extraordinary appears. The trees are still trees. The sky is still the sky. The wind still moves through the leaves. But everything is seen for the first time, not through memory, not through judgment, not through fear, simply as it is. And perhaps this is the greatest miracle. Not that reality becomes sacred, but that we finally see it always was. The world has never been the problem. Perhaps, for the very first time, we begin to understand why the awakened never tried to escape the world. The problem was never the world. The problem was the way the mind looked at the world. The same rain falls upon everyone. One person calls it a blessing. Another calls it a burden. The rain never changed. Only perception did. The same words can become an insult or an invitation to awaken. The same loss can become despair or the doorway to freedom. Reality is constantly offering itself. The mind keeps translating. Awareness simply sees. And in that seeing, something extraordinary happens. The translator grows quiet. For the first time, life is no longer filtered through fear, through memory, through expectation. It is encountered directly, fresh, alive, whole. Perhaps this is what innocence really means. Not ignorance, not forgetting, but seeing without the burden of yesterday, seeing without demanding tomorrow, meeting this moment as though the universe were revealing itself for the very first time. And perhaps it truly is, because every moment has never existed before and never will again. To awaken is not to leave the ordinary. It is to discover that the ordinary has always been the doorway to the infinite, the sacred hidden in the ordinary. Perhaps we have searched for miracles in the wrong places. We searched for heaven beyond the clouds, for enlightenment beyond the mountains, for God beyond the universe. Yet all along, the infinite has been whispering through the ordinary. A cup of tea warming your hands, the laughter of a child, the sound of rain against the window, a single leaf floating to the ground. Nothing asks to be extraordinary. Everything simply expresses what it is. The flower does not bloom to impress. The bird does not sing to be admired. The river does not flow to prove its worth. Only the human mind imagines that existence must become something greater. But reality has never hurried. It has never compared. It has never doubted itself. Perhaps wisdom is not learning to escape the ordinary. It is learning to see that the ordinary has always been wearing the face of the eternal. When this is finally seen, there is no longer a division between the sacred and the secular. Every breath becomes a prayer. Every step becomes a pilgrimage. Every encounter becomes a meeting with the same living presence. And perhaps this is why the awakened can smile without a reason. Not because life has become perfect, but because they have discovered that perfection was never the absence of imperfection. Perfection was the wholeness that quietly embraced every imperfect moment from the very beginning, when even the observer disappears. And then, something even more mysterious begins to happen. At first, we discover that we are not our thoughts. Then, we realize we are not our emotions. And slowly, we begin to recognize ourselves as the observer. That discovery opens an immense freedom, but perhaps the journey does not end there. One day, in profound silence, another question quietly arises. Who is observing? If the observer can also be noticed, can it truly be the final truth? Or is even the observer another subtle idea of me? And then, without effort, without seeking, without trying to answer, something unexpected takes place. The boundary between the observer and the observed simply falls away. There is no inside, no outside, no subject, no object, only knowing itself, pure, limitless, without an owner, without a beginning, without an end, without a name. Perhaps this is what every awakened one has tried to describe through different words. Nirvana, the kingdom of God, the Tao, emptiness, pure awareness. Yet every name stops at the threshold, because what is real cannot be captured by language. It can only be lived here, now, within this very breath, within this simple, silent, self-luminous presence that neither adds nor removes anything from what already is. And perhaps this is the final paradox. Awakening does not reveal someone who has awakened. It reveals that there was never a separate someone to awaken at all. There was only awareness, dreaming that it was a person. And now, the dream has begun to remember the dreamer, living as awareness. And now, a new question naturally appears. If there is no separate self, then how do we live? Do we stop working? Stop loving? Stop creating? Stop caring? No. Quite the opposite. For the first time, life is no longer a burden to carry. It becomes a dance to participate in. The body still walks. The mind still thinks. The heart still feels, but none of them need to become an identity. Thoughts continue to appear, but they are no longer a prison. Emotions continue to arise, but they are no longer a master. The world continues to change, but awareness remains unchanged. Like the sky that never resists the passing clouds, like the ocean that never fears its own waves, awareness allows everything to come, everything to stay for a while, everything to leave, without losing itself for even a single moment. Perhaps this is true freedom, not freedom from life, but freedom within life, not escaping the world, but seeing that nothing in the world can imprison what you truly are. Then, compassion appears without effort, because you no longer meet other people. You meet yourself wearing different faces. Their joy is not separate from yours. Their fear is not separate from yours. Their longing is not separate from yours. The walls that once divided begin to disappear. Love is no longer something you do. It becomes what remains when separation comes to an end. Perhaps this has always been the quiet purpose of human life. Not to become greater, not to possess more, not even to become enlightened, but simply to remember what has never been forgotten by reality itself. To live as the light that has always been shining through every eye, every heart, every breath, since the beginning of time. The universe looking at itself, perhaps, this has always been the deepest mystery. The universe did not create consciousness. Consciousness appeared as the universe became capable of knowing itself. The stars became your bones. Ancient oceans flowed into your blood. The breath of forests became your lungs. Everything that ever existed is quietly meeting itself here. When you look at the night sky, the universe is looking back through your eyes. When you listen to the wind, existence is hearing its own song. When love arises, it is not one person loving another. It is life recognizing itself behind two different faces. Perhaps this is why the sages spoke so gently. Because once this is seen, there is no one left to defeat. No one left to envy. No one left to become. Only life, discovering its own infinite beauty again and again through every being. And perhaps that is why every awakening is also an act of remembrance. Not remembering something that happened long ago, but remembering what has never stopped being true. That beneath every name, every story, every religion, every culture, every lifetime, there has only ever been one light, appearing as many, speaking through countless voices, dreaming countless dreams, until one day it smiles and recognizes itself everywhere. Why we came here. And perhaps one final question still remains. If all of this is one, why did the one appear as many? Why birth? Why death? Why forgetting? Why suffering? Why this long journey through countless lives? Perhaps because love cannot know itself in stillness alone. Light cannot experience its own radiance without something to illuminate. Music cannot be heard without silence. And awareness cannot taste its own infinite nature without appearing as every possible life. Perhaps this universe was never a mistake, never a punishment, never a prison. Perhaps it has always been a sacred exploration, the infinite discovering its own infinity through limitation, the eternal playing with time, the formless dancing as form, the one appearing as billions, only to experience the joy of recognizing itself again. Perhaps this is why every human heart carries a longing that nothing in the world can satisfy, because that longing was never for more possessions, more success, more knowledge. It was always the quiet call to return to what has never been absent, not to return to another place, but to return to seeing, to return to presence, to return to the simple miracle of being. And when that return finally happens, nothing is added, nothing is taken away. The universe continues exactly as before, only now it knows it is awake. And perhaps that has always been the true mission of humanity, not to conquer the earth, not to escape the world, not even to save it, but to become clear enough that the light which has always been shining can illuminate this world through us. Perhaps that is what every sage, every prophet, every Buddha, every Christ was inviting us to remember. Not that we should become the light, but that we have never been anything else, beyond every name. And perhaps there is one final veil that quietly remains, the veil of names. We give names to everything: God, Buddha, truth, consciousness, awareness, love, emptiness, infinity. The names are beautiful. They point. They inspire. They guide. But no name has ever been the thing it points toward. The word water cannot quench your thirst. The map is never the landscape. The finger is never the moon. And perhaps this is why the wisest ones always spoke with such humility. The moment truth becomes an idea, the mind has already stepped away from it. Reality does not ask to be believed. It only asks to be seen. Not tomorrow. Not after another book. Not after another retreat. Now, the next breath. The next sound. The next heartbeat. This is where the infinite keeps revealing itself. Perhaps awakening is not collecting better answers. It is allowing every question to dissolve into direct seeing. And in that seeing, a quiet smile appears. Not because everything has been explained, but because nothing needs to be explained before it can be loved. Perhaps this has always been the secret hidden in plain sight. Life was never asking us to understand the mystery. Life was inviting us to become intimate with it, to walk without certainty, to love without possession, to give without calculation, to see without separation. And perhaps that is enough, because the infinite has never asked for perfection, only presence, only honesty, the courage to remain awake to what is already here. Then, without effort, every ordinary moment becomes a doorway. Every face becomes a mirror. Every breath becomes a remembrance. And the journey that once seemed to stretch across lifetimes is discovered to have ended exactly where it began. Here. Now. Always. The final home was never somewhere else. Perhaps every journey has always been a circle, not a line. We believed we were moving away from home, away from God, away from truth, away from ourselves. So we searched through knowledge, through religions, through philosophies, through success, through suffering, through countless lives of becoming, until one quiet day, we discovered something astonishing. Home had never been behind us, nor ahead of us. Home had always been the awareness within which the entire journey was unfolding. The traveler appeared, the road appeared, the destination appeared, but awareness never moved. It remained exactly where it had always been, like the screen untouched by every movie, like the sky untouched by every storm, like silence untouched by every sound. Perhaps this is why every awakened being speaks more softly than before, because once the search comes to rest, there is no one left to convince, no one left to defeat, only an endless invitation. Be here, see clearly, love completely, and allow this ordinary moment to reveal its infinite depth. Perhaps this has always been the true meaning of coming home, not arriving somewhere new, but recognizing that reality has never been anywhere else. It has always been here, patiently waiting for us to notice. And perhaps that noticing is the beginning of a new humanity. A humanity that no longer asks, who is right, but quietly wonders, can I see through the eyes of love? Because the moment we truly do, the world has already begun to change. The gift we leave behind, perhaps there is one last thing. We have misunderstood. We believe our life is measured by what we achieve, by what we own, by what we build, by how many people remember our name. But perhaps life has always been measured in a different way, not by what we leave to the world, but by what we awaken within it. A single act of genuine kindness may travel farther than an empire. A single moment of true presence may heal a wound that has lasted for generations. A single heart that remembers its own light becomes permission for another heart to remember. Perhaps this is how the world changes, not all at once, not through force, but quietly. One awakened conversation, one forgiven memory, one fearless act of compassion. Like dawn, it does not argue with the night. It simply arrives, and the darkness discovers it was only the absence of light. Perhaps our greatest legacy will never be our words, nor our ideas, nor our accomplishments. Perhaps our greatest gift is the quality of our presence, because people may forget what we said. They may forget what we did, but somewhere deep within, they will remember how their heart felt when it was seen without judgment, loved without condition, met without fear. And perhaps that is how God continues to embrace the world, one human heart at a time. And then we leave. There is one truth that no one escapes. One day, every one of us will leave this world. The body will return to the earth. Our name will slowly fade. Everything we once called mine will belong to someone else. Every role we carefully played will quietly fall away. So what remains? Not the house, not the wealth, not the reputation, not the stories people told about us. Perhaps only one question will remain. Did I truly live? Not how many years I existed, but within those years, how many moments was I completely awake? How many times did I look into another face without judgment? How many times did I listen without preparing my reply? How many times did I love without asking to be loved back? Perhaps those are the only moments that never die, because everything born from the ego belongs to time, but everything born from love belongs to eternity. Perhaps death does not come to take away our life. It comes to take away everything that was never truly ours. And when every mask has fallen, there is no longer the successful one, no longer the failure, no longer the rich, no longer the poor, no longer the believer, no longer the skeptic, no east, no west, only presence, still, luminous, silent, unborn, undying. Perhaps this is why those who have truly awakened do not fear death, because they never identified themselves with what can die. They saw that every form appears and disappears, but awareness never arrives and never leaves. Perhaps the greatest miracle is not to live forever. It is to live this very moment so completely that nothing remains unfinished within the heart. And then, if death should knock upon the door, we simply smile. Not because we know what comes next, but because we have finally discovered that what we truly are was never born, and therefore can never be lost. Perhaps that is why every sunset is beautiful. Not because it is the end of the day, but because it quietly reminds us that every ending is also a returning, not to somewhere else, but to the timeless home that has always been here, God's final dream. Perhaps God never wanted to be worshipped. Perhaps God wanted to become human, not once, not through one prophet, not through one Buddha, not through one Christ, but through every heart that remembers its own light. Perhaps this has always been creation, not God creating the universe, but God discovering himself through the universe, through every child that laughs, through every mother that forgives, through every stranger who chooses kindness instead of fear. Perhaps every time one human being awakens, God opens his eyes one more time. Every act of compassion is God touching his own hand. Every moment of forgiveness is God healing his own heart. Every moment of silence is God remembering his own face. And perhaps the universe has never been trying to produce better humans. It has always been trying to remember its own divinity, not somewhere far away, but here, as you, as me, as everyone. Imagine If just one generation grew up knowing they were never separate, would war still exist? Would greed still make sense? Would hatred still survive? Perhaps. Heaven was never a place waiting after death. Perhaps. Heaven begins the moment we stop pretending to be separate, and earth becomes the garden it was always meant to be. Perhaps this is why the universe kept expanding. Not because space needed to become larger, but because love wanted more places to awaken, more eyes through which to see, more hearts through which to love, more lives through which to remember. And perhaps after everything you have heard, after every question, after every answer, only one invitation remains. Do not believe any of this. Do not follow these words. Simply be still. For one moment, listen, not to me, not to your thoughts, but to the silence that has been waiting behind every sound since before you were born. If you hear it, even for a second, you will understand why every Buddha smiled, why every saint loved, why every mystic became silent, because the one you spent your whole life searching for has been reading these words through your eyes. Chum chum chum, welcome home. The last whisper. Perhaps before we say goodbye, there is only one last thing that remains to be said. Not by a prophet, not by a Buddha, not by a teacher, but by the silence that has always been speaking through them all. Chum chum chum, my beloved, you have searched for me across the stars. You built temples for me. You wrote scriptures about me. You argued over my name. You even went to war because of me. All the while, I never left your breath. I never left your heartbeat. I never left the quiet space between two thoughts. You searched for my voice in thunder. Yet I was the silence that heard the thunder. You searched for my face in heaven. Yet I was the awareness looking through your eyes. Every time you loved without asking for anything, that was me. Every time you forgave when revenge seemed easier, that was me. Every time you sat quietly with another soul and allowed them to be exactly as they were, that was me. I have never been far away. Distance belongs to the body. Time belongs to the mind. But love has never known either. Do not be afraid of your darkness. I have always been there too. Not trapped inside it, but patiently waiting until you turned around. There has never been a single moment when I loved you more or less. You could not earn my love because you were born inside it. You could not lose my presence because it is the very space in which losing appears. Now your journey is becoming very simple. Wherever you meet fear, bring presence. Wherever you meet hatred, bring understanding. Wherever you meet sorrow, bring your whole heart. Do not try to become the light. Simply stop hiding from the light already shining through you. And when you forget, forget gently. When you fall, rise gently. When you fail, love yourself gently. Because I have never spoken to you with condemnation. Only with patience. Only with compassion. Only with an endless invitation to come home. One day, this body will become dust. These words will disappear. Civilizations will rise and fade. Stars will be born and die. Yet, what you truly are will remain untouched, just as it has always been. So if there is one gift you carry back into the world, let it be this. Look into every pair of eyes, as though I am looking back at you, because I am. Love every being, as though they are another form of your own heart, because they are. And when your final breath arrives, do not ask whether you found me. Smile, because you will finally remember I was the one who walked beside you through every joy, through every tear, through every lifetime, not leading you toward home, but quietly waiting until you discovered you had never left. Chum chum chum. And then there was nothing more to say. Only the sound of the wind, the rhythm of a breathing world, the quiet beating of one infinite heart. Welcome home.
The three marks of existence: suffering, impermanence, non-self, and the return to nirvana. If the previous chapters revealed the liberation of consciousness, chapter 10 reveals something even deeper. Perhaps the world has never been the source of suffering. Perhaps we have simply been looking at reality through the eyes of the ego. The Buddha taught that every awakened being sees three universal characteristics of existence: suffering, impermanence, non-self. These are known as the three marks of existence. They are not beliefs. They are not philosophies. They are not ideas that ask us to agree. They are truths that reveal themselves whenever we begin seeing reality exactly as it is. The first mark: suffering. When many people hear the word suffering, they immediately imagine a dark and hopeless world. But perhaps that was never what the Buddha meant. Suffering itself is not pessimism. Understanding suffering is the beginning of freedom. Not all suffering is the same. Some suffering protects life. Some suffering teaches wisdom. Only one kind of suffering chains us to endless cycles of fear. The Buddha invited us to discover the difference. Chapter 10, Part 2, The Three Faces of Suffering. Perhaps not all suffering is the same. Some suffering protects life. Some suffering teaches us. Only one kind of suffering keeps the wheel of bondage turning. The Buddha revealed that suffering appears in different forms. Understanding the difference changes everything. Natural suffering, hunger, thirst, heat, cold, fatigue, pain. Every living being experiences these. They are not punishments. They are not mistakes. They are the intelligence of life itself. Without pain, we would never remove our hand from fire. Without hunger, we would forget to nourish the body. Without exhaustion, we would never rest. Natural suffering protects life. It reminds us how to live in harmony with reality. Karmic suffering. Sometimes suffering appears because our previous actions return to us. Not as punishment, but as education. Imagine, someone ignores a red traffic light. Moments later, they receive a fine. The pain is real, but the pain is also a teacher. Without consequences, wisdom would never grow. Every cause carries its own effect. Every effect invites deeper awareness. Karma is not revenge. Karma is simply life helping us learn. Illusory suffering. This is the suffering the Buddha invited us to end. Not physical pain, not the natural consequences of our actions, but the suffering created by the ego itself. Imagine believing that person will complete me. For a while, everything feels perfect. Then one day, the relationship changes. Nothing outside has truly betrayed us. But the story inside the mind collapses. The body becomes anxious. Sleep disappears. Fear appears. Perhaps the greatest suffering was never created by reality. It was created by attachment, by expectation, by the endless illusion that happiness depends upon something outside ourselves. This is why the Buddha said, freedom begins, not by escaping life, but by seeing clearly. Chapter 10, Part 3, Impermanence. Perhaps nothing has ever been wrong with change. Everything in existence moves. The seasons, the oceans, the stars, the human body. Every breath enters. Every breath leaves. Every heartbeat is born and disappears. This is impermanence, not as a tragedy, but as the rhythm of life itself. Yet the ego whispers a different story. Keep this forever. Don't let this change. Never lose what you love. And from that whisper, suffering begins. When pleasure arrives, the ego wants to possess it. When pain arrives, the ego wants to escape it. When life becomes quiet, the ego becomes restless. The Buddha observed three movements of suffering. The suffering of resisting pain. The suffering of clinging to pleasure. The suffering of endlessly searching. Even when nothing is wrong, pain becomes suffering. When we fight against it, pleasure becomes suffering. When we refuse to let it pass, and even peace becomes suffering. When the mind cannot simply rest. Perhaps impermanence has never been our enemy. Perhaps our resistance to impermanence has always been the real prison. The river never stops flowing. Only the ego demands that the river remain still. Chapter 10, Part 4, Non-Self and the Return to Nirvana. Perhaps the world has never been broken, only the way we have been looking at it. There is a difference between the world and the world created by the ego. The world is reality itself, life unfolding exactly as it is. Nothing added, nothing removed, nothing needing to become something else. But the ego cannot simply see. It immediately says, this should not be happening. Life should be different. I deserve more. I must become someone else. And in that very moment, the world becomes the world, not reality, but a projection, a world built from memories, judgments, expectations, fear, and endless comparison. This is where suffering is born. Not because reality is imperfect, but because the mind refuses to let reality be. Perhaps this is what the Buddha meant by non-self. There is no separate I standing outside life, trying to control the river. There is only the river, flowing, changing, living. The ego wants to possess the river. Awareness simply becomes the river, and the moment that happens, everything changes. Nothing outside changes. Yet everything is different, because the one who was resisting has disappeared. Perhaps Nirvana has never been another place. Perhaps it is simply reality, seen without the illusion of separation. The three marks of existence are not signs of despair. They are doors. Suffering invites us to awaken. Impermanence invites us to let go. Non-self invites us to come home. Perhaps the world has always been Nirvana, and the only thing that ever stood between us and heaven was the story the ego kept telling, the gift hidden inside suffering. Perhaps life was never meant to give us comfort alone. The moon is sometimes full, sometimes hidden. The ocean rises, then falls. Every season arrives, and quietly departs. Why should human life be any different? Joy comes, sorrow comes, gain and loss, success and failure, meeting and parting. The ego believes one must stay, the other must disappear, but reality asks for neither. Reality simply flows. Perhaps the greatest compassion of life is not protecting us from difficulty, but allowing difficulty to awaken us. Sometimes, the people who challenge us the most become our greatest teachers, not because they intended to hurt us, but because they revealed where attachment was still hiding, where expectations still remained, where the ego still whispered, life should be different. Every obstacle invites us to return, not back to the past, not toward a better future, but back to the silent peace that has never left. Then something extraordinary happens. We stop asking life to make us happy. Instead, happiness quietly begins to arise from within, not because the world has changed, but because awareness has finally come home. Love no longer becomes a transaction. It is no longer, I love you because. It simply becomes love, without ownership, without fear, without conditions, still living in this world, yet no longer imprisoned by it. And perhaps this is the highest blessing, to walk through a changing world with an unchanging heart. As an ancient Buddhist blessing says, when touched by the changing conditions of life, the mind remains unshaken, free from sorrow, pure, and at peace. Perhaps this is what it truly means to return home. How God transforms energy. If chapter 5 was the awakening to the eternal heaven that has always been here, then chapter 8 is the story of inner transformation. Perhaps transformation is not something that happens from the outside. It is not a miracle performed upon us. It is the quiet revolution that unfolds within consciousness itself. It is the moment when the countless stories of I am, I should be, I must become, begin to dissolve, allowing reality to reveal itself exactly as it is. In Christianity, separation from God has long been called sin. The original Greek word, hamartia, simply means to miss the mark. Perhaps the mark was never a destination. Perhaps the mark has always been this present moment. In Buddhism, ignorance is not the absence of knowledge. It is the inability to see reality as it truly is. Different traditions, different languages, yet perhaps they point toward the same truth. Transformation begins the moment we return, the moment we stop living inside memory, or chasing an imagined future, and fully meet what is here. The Buddha called this seeing body, feeling, mind, phenomena, exactly as they are, without adding, without subtracting, without naming. The body is known exactly as it is. The feeling is known exactly as it is. The mind is known exactly as it is. Reality is known exactly as it is. In that very instant, we are no longer separated from life, no longer separated from God. Grace is not something given from outside. Grace appears whenever awareness becomes completely present, and within that presence, the natural qualities of wisdom begin to shine. Clarity, stillness, purity, the qualities that Buddhism calls the natural morality, concentration, and wisdom of our own true nature. Perhaps transformation has never been about becoming someone else. Perhaps it has always been about returning to what has never been lost. The flow of karma and the power of grace. Perhaps every action leaves an echo. Every word, every intention, every choice, not because someone is judging us, but because life naturally responds to itself. This is what Buddhism calls karma. Karma is not punishment. It is not destiny. It is simply the movement of cause and effect. Over time, every repeated reaction becomes a habit. Every habit becomes a pattern. And every pattern slowly shapes the person we believe ourselves to be. The Buddha called these deeply rooted patterns mental formations, seeds planted within the mind. The more we repeat them, the deeper their roots become. Until one day, we no longer choose our reactions. Our reactions choose us. This is why suffering often feels so familiar. Not because we are cursed, but because unconscious habits continue repeating themselves. Yet, no matter how strong the past appears, it survives only when the present continues feeding it. The moment awareness enters, the cycle begins to change. Not through force, not through resistance, but through seeing. When anger is seen, without becoming my anger, its power begins to fade. When fear is seen, without becoming my fear, something opens. This is where grace quietly appears. Not as a reward, but as the natural consequence of presence. Perhaps true virtue is not something we perform. Perhaps it is something that naturally flows. When we are fully present with reality, every moment of pure awareness weakens the chains of yesterday. Every moment of presence plants a new seed, and slowly, the old patterns lose their home. This is how karma is transformed. Not by escaping the past, but by no longer creating it. Again, perhaps, the greatest miracle has never been changing the world. Perhaps, the greatest miracle is seeing this moment exactly as it is. Perhaps, transformation has never been about changing who we are. It has always been about allowing awareness to illuminate what has always been here. Every moment of presence weakens the momentum of the past. Every moment of clarity becomes an act of grace. And perhaps, this is how God transforms energy. Not by changing the world, but by transforming the one who is seeing it. We end chapter 8 here. In the next chapter, we will discover the immediate blessings that naturally appear when the ego no longer stands between awareness and life. When the ego becomes silent, the body begins to heal. Insights from the Huangdi Neijing. If the previous chapters explored the liberation of consciousness, this chapter turns toward the liberation of the body. Ancient Chinese wisdom suggests that when the mind returns to stillness, the body naturally moves toward harmony. Perhaps the body was never truly broken. Perhaps it has simply been waiting for the mind to become quiet. Stillness gives birth to vital energy. The Huangdi Neijing says, when the mind rests in emptiness and tranquility, true qi naturally returns. When the ego dominates, attention is constantly pulled outward. We worry, we compare, we replay the past, we imagine the future. Vital energy is consumed by stories that exist only inside the mind. But when awareness rests completely in the present, nothing needs to be defended. Nothing needs to be controlled. The body finally has permission to restore itself. From emotional turbulence to inner harmony. Traditional Chinese medicine teaches that excessive emotions disturb the body's natural balance. Anger affects the liver. Excessive worry weakens the spleen. Fear disturbs the kidneys. Grief burdens the lungs. Whether understood literally or symbolically, the principle is the same. A restless mind creates tension throughout the entire system. Awareness does not suppress emotions. It simply allows them to arise and pass, without resistance, without identification. In that space, the nervous system softens, breathing deepens, the body remembers balance, living in harmony with the way. The Huangdi Neijing speaks often of living in accordance with heaven. In many contemplative traditions, this simply means living in harmony with reality itself. The ego constantly resists what is. Awareness gently receives what is. Even eating, walking, drinking tea, or watching the sunset can become a profound act of healing when experienced with complete presence. The immediate gifts of presence. When identification with the ego begins to loosen, many people naturally notice changes such as deeper, more restful sleep, less physical tension, greater emotional stability, more sustained energy throughout the day, a quiet sense of ease that no external success can provide. These are not miracles. They are the natural consequences of a system no longer consumed by endless psychological conflict. The hidden key of Chapter 9. Perhaps true healing is not something we force. Perhaps healing begins when we stop fighting this moment. When awareness fully embraces what already is. Body, mind, and life itself begin to move together again.